I can't speak today. This is going great already. Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Dadi. This is my first video. I'm gonna do a monthly wrap-up. So I read 7 books in the month of March, and we're gonna go through them, what I thought about them, and what I rated them. Fucking got it. So the first book I read this month was The Library of Lost Things by Laura Taylor Namey. At least Namey, I think that's what we're going with. She is a Cuban-American author, and I believe this is her debut novel. It was published in 2019. And so how this bad boy ended up in my hands was that my local bookstore does a blind date with a book event every year. And I went to it, and I picked out this book, and I think my tag is around here somewhere. Maybe not. I think the tags that were used on this were book about book, mother-daughter relationship, and hoarding. So what this book is about is Darcy, this girl, who lives basically her life within books. She uses books to hide from the world and everything that's wrong with her life because she lives with her mother, who is a hoarder. So basically she spends all of her money, time, paycheck on just buying things that she doesn't need and stockpiling them and hoarding them within their apartment. And that her mother's problem brings a lot of trouble to Darcy's life. This book is YA sort of like about to turn into new adult. Darcy turns 18 while she's in the book, and she's contemplating going off to college and starting out a different part of her life. But it's still very much YA. And along the way, as Darcy deals with all of her problems, including her mother's hoarding, along comes Asher, who at first Darcy equates to Mr. Darcy, who she is named after from Pride and Prejudice. And later turns out he's not that much of a Mr. Darcy. He's actually quite sweet and kind, and just needed to get to know him a little bit better. I rated this book 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I think I might change that up to like a 4 because I really enjoyed this. It was a great read, a lot of literary references, which I greatly enjoyed, and it was just like a fun time. The romance was really well built up, and just the exploration of Darcy as she comes out of her shell, or like her book cover, basically, is really interesting, and her dealing with her mom's like hoarding problem is very interesting and a compelling story. There's a very complex mother-daughter relationship in this, but there's also a lot of tropes that I really like. She has a great like her best friend Marisol is like the best. She's like Darcy's greatest cheerleader, and also like Marisol's family really welcomes Darcy into their own family, even though they don't completely know what's going on in her own family life, but they welcome her as one of their own. And it's a beautiful book. It's well crafted. There's a lot of Peter Pan references, which has made me want to read Peter Pan, which I've never done. So all in all, 4 out of 5 stars. Love this book. Second book that I'm going to talk about, it makes me a little bit what's the word that I'm looking for? Embarrassed to say that I am over 10 years late to this party. Everybody and their mother has read this book, and I just started reading the series now, but here it is. I read City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I've seen the movie and I've seen the show, and I finally decided that it was time to read this book. The reason why I decided to pick this up was because I've seen the movie and the show, and I kind of wanted to see how it differed from the books, but also because of Alec and Magnus. I'm going to be very real with y'all. They're the only reason I'm here, and there wasn't nearly enough of them in this book. And that was, and I found Clary to be a whiny main character. I get that she's 15 and she's going through a lot of teenage angst, but also like compared to another like 16-year-old that I read this month, Clary's just like super whiny, basically expects everybody to do things for her. Her whole hatred of women, I cannot stand. She hates all other girls that aren't her, especially when they come near Simon or Jace, which is like, you either figure your shit out, man. So yeah, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I got real critical with this one. I didn't get super critical, but I was just like, constantly reading from Clary's perspective it was a challenge. And like, I thought that there was going to be more perspective shift because it is written in the third person and the book starts off with a perspective shift, but it didn't shift nearly enough. And it was mostly told from Clary's perspective. And like I said, whiny, could not stand her. So kudos to the show for making Clary a much more likable character than she is in the book. And that's all I have to say about that. I read Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx. I read this freshman year of college for my film adaptation class. So we read the novella and we also watched the movie. And I hadn't reread it since I read it the first time, and I wanted to, and it's a quick, 55 pages. And it was still just as heartbreaking as it was the first time. I wanted more for Jack and Ennis than they got to have in the end. If you don't know, Brokeback Mountain is about these two cowboys who go sheep herding one summer in Brokeback Mountain, and they fall in love and they start a sexual relationship. And many years later they reunite and they continue to have this sexual relationship and very much emotional relationship throughout the next decade or so, even more actually, about like the next 15 years I think it was. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking. It's set in the 1980s in like Texas, and where was Brokeback Mountain? I can't remember which state it was, but they both get married and have children, yet they continue on to have this very deep emotional relationship as well as a sexual relationship throughout the years. And I won't say any more than that because, well, I mean, most people know how this book ends, or how the movie ends. But it's a great book. I definitely recommend it as a read. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars just because, like, it's a really beautiful novella. It's a look at how we can't always get what we want, even though I wanted more for them than what they got. So yeah. The 4th book I read this month is book 1 of a trilogy I just started. This is the month that I just started all of the series, and it is a book that has been on my TBR for far too long. It is The Forbidden Game by L.J. Smith. I didn't read the entirety of this book. I read the first book of the trilogy, which is The Hunter. I still have the other 2 to read. This stars main character Jenny. She's 16. She's buying a board game for her boyfriend's birthday so that they can all play, and then the board game basically saps them into a different dimension in which they have to face their worst fears, and the person they're up against is Julian, who is a shadow man and who is in love with Jenny. Thoughts on this book? Having read City of Bones and The Hunter on the same month really showed me that I was right, that Clary is a whiny protagonist, because Jenny is around Clary's age. She's 16, 17, and she is faced with basically her worst fears and confronting like some of the worst things that have not only happened to her but have happened to her friends. And she stays cool, calm, collected for most of it. I mean, she has her emotional outbursts like everyone, but she really like uses her logic in her head to like get through all the ordeals that she's being put through. And more than that, she outsmarts Julian at the end of the book without him even noticing that he is being outsmarted until the very end. So A+ for Jenny, D- for Clary. So yeah, I'm probably going to be reading book 2, The Chase, sometime in the month of April. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. I found it super entertaining. I was hooked the entire time, wanted to keep reading. I really like Jenny's friendship dynamics. She has like 5 really close friends, I think it was. Something like that. She has a bunch of close friends that go on in this roller coaster ride with her, and they all they support each other and they're all there for each other. This book sets up stakes that it goes through with. One of her friends doesn't make it through the game, doesn't make it out. Her boyfriend can choke. Tom, her boyfriend, can choke. I hate him so much. Their relationship is super one-sided. And I think he notices that by the end of the book, but still their relationship is one-sided as hell. He could choke. And of course, I have many, many feelings about Julian because that is the type of person that I am. I like morally ambiguous antagonists that do all the wrong things but also do all the right things, because Julian has a moral code. He speaks very deliberately. He chooses his words carefully. Anytime Jenny throws something in his face, he's like, think about it. I told you this exact thing, not you. Whatever you interpreted out of it was completely different. So yeah, I have very many feelings about Julian. I love him. And I can't wait to continue on with this series. I hope it surprises me. This one is quick and easy. The 5th book I read this month was Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Why did I read this? Well, this was a reread. I read this for work. I recently started teaching. I'm teaching a 9th grade class in which we're discussing Romeo and Juliet. So I read this for work, which means that I'm not going to give it a rating because I think about books that I read for pleasure and books that I read for work or school very differently. I overanalyze these while I analyze the others, but I don't overanalyze them as if I were gonna teach them. My only comment on it, I don't think I have to explain the plot of Romeo and Juliet or what it's about, but my only comment on this is that half of the things that happen in the second half of the book, of the play, wouldn't have happened if Friar Lawrence wasn't A, dramatic bitch, and B, stupid. He just wanted to do a dramatic reveal of Romeo and Juliet's marriage, and now 6 people are dead. So, thanks, dude. Book number 6, Artemis by Andy Weir. This is set on the moon. I am an astronomy nerd through and through. I mean, I'm a huge lit nerd, but I'm also a huge astronomy nerd. And the fact that this was set on the moon made me really happy. Jazz is the main character. She lives on Artemis, the only city on the moon. And she is complicated. She does some badass stuff, but she's also very flawed. She's smart, but also she has the sense of humor of a 15-year-old boy, which was kind of annoying. This is kind of hard sci-fi. It goes real hard on the science aspect of sci-fi. So it kind of lost me on some parts. I found myself drifting off or not paying attention to what I was reading, and sometimes not even understanding what was going on because they went too deep into the scientific explanation of what was going on. So that kind of lost me in some parts. Also, another thing that kind of lost me was that it was the narration is really, really dry. It's told from Jazz's perspective, first-person point of view, and it's very dry. She can be witty at some times, but other times it just seems like too forced humor, and it was just not the greatest narration I've ever read. I originally gave this a 4 out of 5 stars on my Instagram and on my Twitter, but I am definitely changing this to a 3 out of 5. Seems much more where it should be. So that's that. And for my last book of the month, this was a complete accident. This was on my TBR for April, but because we're quarantined and I don't know how days work anymore, I kind of forgot that March still had 3 more days to go, and I started reading and I finished City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. Again, this was meant to be on my April reading list, and I finished it in March. I finished it yesterday I'm filming on April 1st. I finished this yesterday at like 11:50 p.m. because I forgot how days work. So, City of Ashes is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. It's the continuation of City of Bones. I have a dear friend that was kind enough to lend me her book of City of Ashes and City of Glass, so I will be reading that at some point, either in April or in May. And I like this one better than City of Bones because I got less time on Glary's perspective, but then I got more Jace, and I don't know which one of them is worse. Everybody's so dumb, and like they can't get their shit together. And also, like, I have to admit that I was much more invested in the subtext and subplot of what was going on in Alec and Magnus's relationship than I was in like the rest of this book. But I admit that I'm kind of biased. I came for Alec and Magnus. This is why I'm here. But also just like, why do the best characters get pushed to the side? Because honestly, I feel like Alec is a much more complex and interesting character to look at than Clary. I understand that she has her crusade against her mother and Valentine is her father, but still, I'm not invested in her character at all. She could choke and die, and I really wouldn't care. She almost died a few times in this book, and I was like, okay, sure. But like Alec fell off the side of a boat, and I was so worried, and then nobody told me what happened for another like 20 pages, and I was like very worried, okay? So yeah, I don't know. I found out yesterday as I was reading that Alec and Magnus are basically getting their own trilogy, and I was very, very happy. I was like, okay, so this is why I'm reading, so I can understand that, and so I can get to that. So yeah, still gonna power through. I mean, not power through. I enjoyed the book, but I could have done with a little less Jason Clary. They just drive me up a wall. So yeah, I give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it better than the first one. But yeah. Yeah, I just give me more Alec and Magnus. That's what I want. That's what I want. So that has been my monthly wrap-up. That is what I read in the entirety of the month of March. I read much more than I normally do because of quarantine. We've been quarantined here for like 3 weeks. So I have work. I'm like still giving online classes, but I also have a lot more downtime than I normally do. So I plowed through the stack of books that I just showed you. So yeah. I have some other videos coming up that are already filmed, edited, ready to go after I post this one. So yeah, thanks for watching. Okay, bye.